or firework location along 2.5 miles of Tampa's waterfront. So very excited about our new tradition in our city. The Sunrail Tour, I wanted to follow up on that as well. At the May 6th board meeting, a motion was passed for the HART board and any other interested elected officials to travel to see Sunrail in Orlando to review the operations of that rail service. Staff is working on identifying potential dates, probably in the fall, as most of this tour will be conducted outside, so I'll get back to you on that. Moving on to the joint workshop between the MPO board and the HART board. The MPO board did express interest in holding a joint board workshop in October of this year. The purpose of the workshop is going to be discussing advancing transit, particularly fixed guideway transit, including the possibility of reusing, of course, the CSX tracks, but not limited to just rail, and really how the long-range transportation plan that is anticipated to be adopted in November should, look at all of the options as it goes forward. The 100 days, completed my 100 days on July 3rd. You should have at your seat printed copies of the 100-day report that you previously received right before the 4th of July. I probably picked the worst day to send that off, but it provides really an overview about the culture, the position that staff and myself are trying to put HART in as a world-class, best-in-class transit agency. To start the journey, though, in the coming fiscal year, HART's going to focus on success outcomes in 4 key areas: customers, finances, employees, and of course, community value. And then lastly, I'd like to close with the rollout and stand-up of the organizational redesign efforts. We've designed an organizational structure to deliver excellent service to our customers and meet the mandate of the voters, customers, and community to double our scope of services potentially next year. So we completed an industry benchmark of our peer agencies' organizational structures to align with how we are positioned for our new business realities and goals. Then we've also built some position profiles and identify key traits and experience for some senior leadership positions. Look forward to announcing the HART transformation in the coming weeks as we prepare to double in size. This concludes my remarks today. I would be happy to take any questions.
Any questions, Michelle Ann, you recognize?
I have just 2 questions. When will the
microphone on?
Yep, it says it's on. When will the bus barriers be implemented? Over what period of time?
Okay, so we will complete the manufacturing this summer, and we're going to start the installation this fall. We should have the entire fleet done by the end of the year.
Okay. By the end of this calendar year?
Calendar year,
okay.
Yes.
Thank you. And then your 100-day report, did you post it on the website? You should if you didn't. I think it's important for people to set the standard or at least have access to what's being accomplished and what the focus is. And as you create a dashboard out of that, which I'm assuming these 4 quadrants will be, you would do like a monthly or quarterly dashboard against your metrics that you set. And, I think the public does go to websites and look at that data, so I'd encourage you to post it.
Absolutely, will do.
Anyone else? Commissioner Kipp, you recognize.
Thank you. I just wanted to thank Mr. Limmer. I'm very, very pleased to hear that Route 30 is now going to this housing authority, and I assume that's right. Does it go forward to the Social Security Administration building too?
Yes.
Okay, great. That is so important, and it was really awful that we cut it, and it caused a lot of misery for a lot of people. So thank you very much. I'm glad to hear that's back.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, thank you. I think enough reports have been given by the Executive Director. I don't need to say anything. Counselor, that report?
Yes, good afternoon. You'll note a slight rearrangement of the agenda order. The public comment comes at number 7. Therefore, what I'm going to say at number 5 is not really an action item per se. So 10B, which is an action item, I'll leave that for when that comes up in the agenda after the public comment. But in 5, I've got a couple of things I need to bring to your attention. Number 1 is I am going to ask you to direct me to change the policy deal with the Litigation Claims Committee. We need to clarify the makeup of the committee. We have a current policy that is no longer consistent with the terminology being used pursuant to the reorganization. In order for me to come to this board with a proposed policy change, this board needs to direct me at a meeting to come back at the next meeting with the policy change. So I'd hope someone would make a motion for me to come back with a revised policy on the HART's Litigation Claims Committee.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion by Ms. Shanahan, second by Councilman, might as well blank. Anyway, second to the motion. Any discussion on that? See no discussion. All those in favor, let them know by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed likewise. Motion is adopted.
Okay, the second item, if you'll turn to tab 5.
That was second by Mr. Councilman Chesler.
If you turn to page 5, what I'm asking you to do is to set a closed session. I'm asking for that closed session as counsel for the authority. I need to have a closed session to discuss pending litigation matters with the HART Litigation Claims Committee. It will follow the requirements of 286.011 open parent, 8 closed parent, which is the closed session process. But I need to have this entity establish or call for that closed session. I really would like to do 2 things. The first, if you look on page 5.1, I have a requested motion to set a closed session for the Litigation and Claims Committee in compliance with Florida statutes for July 23rd, 2019. Secondly, I'll come to a policy, but if I can have a motion to that effect, I would appreciate it.
Second.
Motion by Councilman Chesler, second by Ms. Shanahan and Mr. Mechanic to have a closed session of the Litigation and Claims Committee on July 23rd, 2019. Are there any questions? Seeing no questions, all those in favor, let me know by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed likewise, motion is adopted. Yes,
Okay,
sir.
the next item of business is at the very bottom of that page. I'm requesting that you establish or call for a closed session on the 4th Tuesday of each month on an ongoing basis, so that if we have items in the Litigation and Claims Committee that need to be discussed in private, we need to have the authority to have a closed session or private session.
Second.
Second, motion by Mr. Mechanic, second by Mr. Chesler, Councilman Chesler and Ms. Williams. Any further discussion? Seeing no discussion, all those in favor, let them know by saying aye. Aye. Opposed likewise, motion adopted.
Lastly, an item that's not listed, I would like to obtain the advice of this board with regard to the pending litigation dealing with the transit surtax. I'd request that we set a closed session at our next regular meeting so that if we need to, we can have a closed discussion with regard to the strategies and litigation processes that may be attendant to that matter when you next meet. If it's not necessary, we just won't hold the meeting. But if we have to have the meeting, it has to be called for at this meeting, before the one before so I'd request a motion to have a closed session.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Mechanic, second by Councilman Chesler to have this closed meeting, which I hope we never have. Any discussion? Commissioner Smith, you recognize.
Yes, just so that everybody understands, it's my understanding that if we did have to have a closed session, there would be minutes taken, and there would come a point where the affairs discussed at the meeting would become public record.
The statute actually requires a verbatim transcript, and it will be sealed until the litigation is over, and it will be available as a public record.
Just wanted to make
Yes,
that
ma'am.
point publicly. Thank you.
Any further questions? Seeing none, all those in favor, let them know by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed likewise, motion is adopted.
Nothing further, sir.
Thank you, sir. Okay. Employee recognitions.
Good afternoon, Ruthie Reyes-Burkhardt, Chief Operating Officer for HART. We're recognizing this for the month of May. Operator Johnny Burt joined HART with us as a bus operator August 31st in 2015 because he has always enjoyed driving and meeting new people. When he isn't at work, he enjoys fishing, football, and basketball. We wish him a well and congratulations.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Justin Laffler, Director of Maintenance. I'd like to recognize for the month of May, Ricardo Fernandez. Ricardo is a fleet maintenance master mechanic and has been with HART since March 1989.
Thank you. Okay. All right, we're going to move into public input on agenda items. You have 3 minutes to discuss any agenda item. We have one person signed up for the agenda item, that's Chris Villa. Mr. Villa. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, everyone. So I wanted to adjust the agenda here today. My name is Chris Fella, Tampa, Florida 33605, and I'm historic E-Board. I'm a little bit concerned about the routes 20X and 275X going towards Pasco County. I understand that FDOT is providing some money, which is great. We do need to support transit. However, I'm wondering what PCPT's contribution to this is. So what is Pasco County actually offering on the table to increase any type of service and to help with cost offsets? So I might be late to this conversation, but I think maybe some questions should be raised about this in particular. There was an issue about fare collections, and so when we're talking about destinations, regional destinations, some of these buses are going to federal facilities. They're being operated on federal facilities. Every time a bus comes at the curb stop, right, they should get a credit. Every time that Lyft or a private vehicle comes to the curb stop, or private fleet, if you will, there should be a fee assessed, and that fee is already active in TIA. But what we need to do is we need to reassess that fee and take that money and improve any type of regional service that are going to federal facilities. This would even apply to McDill. There's got to be a way to recuperate more money. I know that we have the surtax pending, but a lot of this is for capital improvement. We need to look forward is operational improvements. What we need to look forward is making sure we have a good headway system for regional transit and also local. I am a little bit concerned about the federal funding that FDOT is going to be providing to the Tampa Downtown Planning Partnership. While I think the Downtowner has been successful, what it's not has been successful is the dozen parking lots that are off of Marion, right? So if you go down Marion from the heart of downtown and walk all the way to Tampa Heights, there's a whole bunch of surface lots. Now, I understand that HART is already starting to gear towards TOD programs. I guess that was something that was through the MPO. What we really need to do is work closely with the neighborhood associations and even with the partnership to say, well, what can we do to sell these empty lots? How can we develop them to be TOD or just have some type of cycling infrastructure, right? Because I use that. I use Marion to get to where I need to go on the bike. We just need to improve it better. I think that the same could apply for Morgan as well. We just need to look at our transit assets and just make them as gold star as we possibly can in the shortest amount of time. Another problem that I have here is with the funding is the CNG buses. I know that there's some commissioners here that have been pushing for electrification. I think that's a great thing. CNG is only going to be 8% less impactful to diesel. 8%. It's really not going to make a huge dent at all. If this agency really wants to reduce their carbon footprint, if this agency really wants to go for green bonding to get more money for infrastructure, they got to do better than the 8%. Hybrid diesel is actually even better than CNG. And I just want to tell you, in the extraction of CNG, sometimes there's fracking involved. You get a tremendous amount of water that has to pump into the earth. You get a lot of wastewater coming out. You got a lot of diesel equipment pumping that out. So when you get this fuel, you're actually contributing to a large footprint. So I know my time's up. I appreciate you guys hearing me out. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Commissioner Kemp, you're recognized.
Thank you. There's about 5 things I'd like to respond to, but just at the top, I'd just like you to know, because I don't want anybody to misunderstand that, because I've been really sure of this every time, FDOT does pay the entirety of those routes that go within other counties. We don't pay anything at all, although the service isn't very robust, but they do pay the full bill.
Okay. I think that's the only person we had on the agenda items. Thank you, sir. Now moving to presentation of the safety and security trends update, Mr. Chairman, Mr. CEO, you want to introduce this?
I can't handle that, no way. Yeah, thank you very much. As you all requested, I've organized a safety and security trends update from 2 individuals. We have here with us today Bill McLeod. Again, he's Vice President and Chief Operating Officer of McLeod Transportation and Associates. In his current role, he leads a team of consultants that provide operational assessments, quality assurance, ADA compliance, as well as safety analyses to several multimodal transit systems throughout the country. His previous role was the Senior Vice President with Veolia Transportation. There, he was responsible for providing leadership and support to the executive and senior management team, both nationally as well as internationally. Veolia Transportation, of course, has over 17,000 employees and operates 150 contracts for cities and transit agencies in the United States as well as Canada. Bill has over 25 years specific transit experience, and of course is very well known nationally and internationally for all of his leadership expertise. His experience does cover both the public and the private sectors as well. So Bill will provide the national overview, and then we also have with us Clinton Forbes. Clinton is the Executive Director of Palm Tran in Palm Beach County. For over 30 years, Mr. Forbes has solidified a reputation as a leader and innovator in public transportation. He's a Florida native. Forbes has been the Executive Director of Palm Tran since the fall of 2015. You know, Palm Tran is a mid-sized transit agency, provides fixed route and paratransit services to the geographically largest county east of the Mississippi River. I did not know. The bus system has 400 vehicles, so it's about, roughly twice the size of HART. Travels to every major destination in Palm Beach County, provides more than 9 million rides and 1 million paratransit trips each year. Prior to Palm Tran, Forbes spent 25 years at the senior management and leadership levels at the Miami-Dade MPO, and then 3 transit properties, Miami-Dade Transit, JTA in Jacksonville, as well as the Central Ohio Transit Authority in Columbus, Ohio. So I'm going to pass the mic to these two gentlemen, and then I think we'll take questions after each of the presentations.
Thank you very much. It is truly my honor to be before this honorable board to present a national perspective. As you heard, my credentials. Also, I'm a member of the Transportation Research Board. It's a national organization under the National Academy of Science, Engineering, and Medicine. We at the TRCP group, which is one of the programs that is initiated for research for transportation industry nationally. I've been a member of the TOPS committee, which is the committee that oversees the funding of selected projects that are transit in nature. And over the past year, 2019, we looked at 73 projects, of which one of these projects in 2018 was the project on the tools and strategies to eliminate assaults against bus operators. This particular project nationally has been on the front burner of issues facing transit industry operations. Not only here, but North America. We work very closely with the union leadership, not only here, but in Canada, as putting this particular project together, TCRP Project 193. Just a quick overview of the TCRP and the program itself. We have over 7,000 engineers and scientists that work on these projects year-round. So it's a comprehensive review of what's going on in the industry. The TCRP and the TOPS committee itself, we have 26 professionals from the industry, both public and private sector, who are part of the TCRP group and the TOPS committee. We lost something. Did I do something wrong? Okay. I think we're good. The TOPS committee itself, as I said, we have 26 people who are selected for that, and it comes from both the public and the private sector. The note here is that 26, 2/3 of those 26 have to come from the transit industry. We serve a total of 3 years initially, and if you're reappointed for a second term, then you do 2 terms. I'm in my second term and will expire in 2021. The report that we're talking about today, and I'm going to give you a quick overview on this report, is Report 193, as I stated earlier. And it's in 2 volumes. Volume 1 consists of reviewing the assets and the assessment of how we actually put the study together. Volume 2 is a toolbox approach as to how the industry can utilize this report to do an assessment on their own particular agency. This report has been requested many, many times over by many agencies to use as a footprint for doing an analysis on their own agency in terms of reducing assaults on their bus operators. The contributors to this report, the countermeasures, assessment, security experts, the Transportation Resources Association, the Transportation Corporation Research Program, the TRB Board, and the National Academies, along with the transit unions. The transit unions that participated in this program was the International ATU and SMART, the Sheet Metals, Air, Rail, and Transportation Workers, which is also out of Canada. Mr. Ed Watt, who represents the ATU internationally, is part of our TOPS committee. So what I'm sharing with you have been on the front burner of the national ATU and their interest in understanding how they can, and gave us some input in terms of this report and how they feel that things should go. I can tell you from the objective of this was to develop a practical toolbox that agencies like yours can use to go out and do an assessment of the threats and the dangers that affect your bus operators. The approach was really 4 major components of our approach to do this research. And it included analysis, both workforce analysis, interviews with individuals, professionally and unprofessional, professionals, and people who were involved in the transit industry throughout. The research tabs that we used, the task that we used to do this, was actually 11 of them all total. I won't bore you with those research, but what I want to do is move to our next, the research deliverables. As I stated, we had 2 key items that we want to focus on. But the second one is the most important one, which is the toolbox that you can use to have your transit agency take this report, use this toolbox to do that analysis. And that's critical to finding out exactly what you're doing, route by route, to get a sense of the dangers and the areas that needs to have particular attention to. And you have all of that data already there with your security and safety people that gets all of the complaints, all of the input from your bus operators. So you have all of that available. It's a matter of having it, putting in the package that you need to have it in. One of the things that we found that we needed to really understand what was national database actually saying what a operator assault is. Now, their identification or understanding what it is does not cover everything. So you have to look at what happens with your organization, such as sexual harassment or harassment, spitting, and all of those that you bring into your aspect of what you have to do. There is no cookie cutter approach to this. It's all doing it based upon what your needs are. The causes of assaults. If you look at what is on the board, fair enforcement is 44% of the challenges that bus operators have when they're in the field that cause an assault on or disagreement on an operator. The second one is rules disputes, 18%. And the other one is verbal arguments that are escalated into a altercation or some type of discord. We went out and took a look and had 58 people responded to our research. And these are some of the things that we found that was there initially. And as you can see, that the verbal intimidations and what have you, right down the line, you can see what those 58 responses were. Weapons was kind of the last one, but a lot of it was the spitting and things of this nature that involved throwing objects at the buses and what have you. I know this is kind of technical. I don't want to stay on that. I'm going to move to some other things. But this intervention and deterrent effect that you have here, and a couple things that I do want to talk about on it, is how you as an agency approach what you're going to do to mitigate assault on your operators. This wheel kind of gives you an idea on the approach legally, also barriers, interviewing, and mitigating those types of activities that may affect your bus operators. These are the effect of the countermeasures to prevent those assaults. And as you go through, and I will get a little bit more detailed on that, but barriers is one that you talk about. The other aspect of this is how you educate your public in terms of, and the program that Mr. Lemmer has started in terms of Ride with Respect. How do you communicate that to the riding public? What kind of signage you have in your buses to tell them that it is against the law to do anything of an assault against a bus operator? Internationally and nationally, the unions have worked very closely together with local legislators to make attack on a transit worker a felony, up to include the death of a transit operator, life without parole. I can tell you now, Florida is not close to what some of the other communities have put together in helping to make it a penalty that people think twice about. And that is a key factor in how people really understand and will respond to what you're trying to get done. So I would encourage this group to look at legislatively, working with the unions on how you go back and speak to your legislature, working with the Transit Association for the state of Florida to do it a statewide approach. And that's the best way to get that done. One of the other things that I had the experience of dealing with in St. Louis was a situation similar as this, that you don't have a transit police. So how do we approach that? We use police officers as secondary, undercover, plain clothes, plain cars, And we looked at areas that had high risk, and we deployed those there. That helped, and it also sent a message to the community and to your bus operators. Each one of you, and particularly HART, is responsible to ensure that each bus and transit is in a safe environment, work in a safe environment. So legally, you're tasked to do that. And every means and ways that you can help pursue that is a critical thing as you look. The second part of our report is the user guide. As I stated earlier, it is a toolbox to help ensure that you are able to use this particular report and what it brings to the table in terms of that. This toolbox overview gives you the risk assessment of each one of your routes and your whole system, or how you do it, and then the countermeasures that it takes to do an assessment of your. Next area is the tools and strategies within that toolbox. We talk about policies, plans, police security. All of those are key factors in how you take a look at it. One of the things that I do want to share with you, we talk about the ride with respect. The other piece of that is drive with respect. How do you train your drivers to recognize and de-escalate situations that they're in? So this is an important aspect of how you get your arms around what is happening with your transit operators, being able to have the tools to de-escalate situations before they get out of hand. And that is very critical in doing that. These categories, just go through and it gives you a little bit more information on each one of them. I'm not going to go through each one, but they give you an idea on the protection systems, the training that I just spoke about in terms of drive with respect, how you get your operators ready to go. The summary of the toolbox itself just gives you kind of an outline of what's in that toolbox. I would encourage HART and his team to take a look at what's in that whole report, look at it and see if they can use anything in it. Many of the agencies are using this tool. Like I said, it's 2018. I want to go to one of the areas that helped us really bring this to home, and this was a pilot program we did at Charlotte Area Transit Authority. John Lewis and his team, who's the CEO, and you can see everyone that was affected in that area of how you reduce assaults on bus operators. As you can see, the general manager, the safety and security team, the Charlotte Police Department, and the Sheriff Department, and the Mecklenburg, and outlying police communities. Those things are very critical to bring everyone together in your community to focus on those areas so you can have a comprehensive approach to reducing attacks against bus operators. A couple things we learned from the pilot program in Charlotte, North Carolina. We know that the assessment tools that we use work. We know that if you are able to do and utilize those tools and train the individuals, you're going to get results. We did have some areas that did not, and basically that come around to money. If you look at what it takes to have a police presence or what have you, or barriers on buses, that's money. And of course, you've already solved the barrier part. It's about the policing. Some final thoughts. Transit operators are your frontline ambassadors. they're the ones that's out there on the front line every day. They are HART. How they are looked upon and how your service is completed is basically because of them. Drivers, customers, or what have you, that's what they see. The customers see the drivers. They do not see management as much or your leadership at this level. But those drivers are your first line ambassadors. The TCRP 193 report is a valuable resource to evaluate. And just want to leave you with one thought. This is from our manager of the TCRP, and she brings and states to you the sorrow that we know about in DC as to what happened here in HART. And we give our sincere condolence to you and hope that from this, that life is not lost in vain, and that no one else in HART will ever have the fear of the loss of their life or injuries due to them trying to do their job. And they deserve that. I thank you, and I am available for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. McLeod. Ms. Shanahan, you recognize.
How many states have the felony, from a tougher sentence, I guess, than Florida in terms of an attack on a, would TCRP have that data so we could take that to our legislators and give us a ranking of what states have what?
Yes, I will get that for you and get it to the board. But there are several states that do have it, but most of them do not. Most of them have a misdemeanor as a deterrent. I personally worked on the one in Nevada, and it was only because my safety director was an assemblyman and became a state senator that we were able to put that on the ballot and get it through the legislation to make it a felony to attack the bus operator, the same as a police officer. But there are other states that are doing that, as I said, up to if you cause damage, it's a felony. It may not be a felony 1, but it can be a 2 or 3, but they do have felonies.
Okay. Yeah, I'd like to get that data, and I think we should have a conversation with Jeff Brandes.
I will get that to Mr. Limmer.
Thank you, sir.
Any other questions? Mr. McLeod, thank you very much. Mr. Forbes?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the Hillsborough Area Regional Transit Authority. As introduced, my name is Clinton Forbes, and I'm the proud leader of PalmTran in Palm Beach County, Florida, a mid-sized transit organization very similar in size to HART. We provide service to 1.4 million residents in Palm Beach County. We have 400 vehicles, but that's broken down. The fixed route is about 170, what you have. To my chagrin, 300 vehicles, we provide paratransit services. That's a whole nother conversation. We have approximately 10 million rides per year, and we do that with 630 outstanding employees. So it is my pleasure to present, and thank you, Mr. Limmer and Mr. Chair and Board, for allowing us to have this conversation with you and take advantage of this opportunity while we're engaged in our national conference, the Conference of Minority Transportation Officials, COMTO. And I'd also like to thank Board Member Williams for her moderation of one of the panels this afternoon. You did an excellent job, so thank you for participating. So to jump right into this, I think that was covered. Despite my youthful look, I have 30 years of transportation experience, and those agency shows for that. And so I've been around the block, starting out in the transportation planning space, and ever since that, a stint in the mayor's office, and worked in the largest transit agency in Florida, as well as the Jacksonville Transportation Authority. Took a pretty huge leap north to Columbus, Ohio, and I'm back in beautiful Florida, the best state in the union. But I really want to start out with thanking you for your leadership, Mr. Chair and members. Mr. CEO, thank you for your leadership. And it was on display nearly a month ago at the Florida Public Transit Association meeting, where CEO Limmer and his staff, Colin Malloy, delivered really a powerful presentation on taking this leadership position. You know, leadership is a choice. You could have sat back on this issue, but you chose to lead on this, and the industry thanks you for that. And it was really on display at our state association meeting last month. It goes without saying that this is a pivotal event in our industry. Also a pivotal event for me as a leader of an organization that uses human beings to transport human beings. And so, you know, this event touched us across the world. And many employees came to me, bus operators, and they said, you know, we want to be there to support HART. And they probably thought, because I'm somewhat fiscally conservative, that I couldn't approve bus operators traveling across state using our equipment. I immediately say, yes, what a great idea. If you can fill a bus, let's go. And we put together this proclamation. Turns out we had, 49 bus operators attend the services. So we had to actually have the van to follow the bus. They really appreciated this, and I believe I got a call from the CEO and staff that it was really appreciative. The proclamation was delivered to Mr. Dunn's family, and it reads in part, Palm Tran in Palm Beach County will not take the loss of Mr. Dunn in vain and will work tirelessly to evaluate our safety measures and increase protections for our bus operators. We've already been doing this, but we are now redoubling efforts in this issue. You know, that's our mission statement. You know, a long time ago, I learned 3 important facts about executing transit operations. 3, you might want to jot this down, it's a little difficult. 3 important facts: safety, safety, and safety. Have to be at the forefront of transit operations. And it really starts with the culture of your organization. Everybody is responsible for safety in your organization, from the CEO to the bus operator to the hostler to the board members. You're all responsible for safety. And you know, one of the things I like things very succinct, such as your mission statement. And we had this long, really protracted, very hard to remember mission statement, and we revised it as an organization. And this is it. It's to provide access to opportunity for everyone. I can unpack that part of that all day. Transportation is not in that mission statement, but it's all over it. Safely, efficiently, and courteously. And that's how we want to deliver that access to opportunity. Safely, efficiently, and courteously. We also have tenets and core values that we stand firmly by, which includes communication, respect, recognition, integrity, and teamwork. You're not alone in this issue. Most of our customers in Hillsborough County are great customers. Most of our customers in Palm Beach County are great customers. But with any business, transit, Walmart, Chili's, you have an occasional knucklehead that visits your business. Transit's no different. We have knuckleheads that visit our business. And just recently, fresh, off the press in Palm Beach County, we had one of those little knuckleheads visit our business. And he boarded. Our fare is $2. He paid a $1 fare. And the operator, who was a female, stated the policy. The fare is $1. He took his seat. She restated the fare. The fare is $1. and he came back up and paid, $2. He came back up and paid the extra $1, so he paid his full fare and went back to the back. The next boarding was a senior who boarded and paid $1. Our fares for seniors are half fares. He then took a seat. This young person came up to the front of the bus and open hand hit her as hard as he could that she had to be transported to the hospital. Unprovoked. She did her job. We didn't catch him right away. The next day, all of our systems in place, working with the sheriff's office, we caught this person who, by the way, had mental issues, and he's currently in jail. You're not alone in this
If you
situation.
don't mind me asking, sir,
Sure.
he's currently in jail being charged with what?
So he is being charged with battery. So just a little on your conversation, the question about assault and battery. Yes, assault is a misdemeanor, but battery is a felony. And so it's a third-degree felony, and he has been charged with third-degree felony
Okay, thanks.
in Florida. Our safety management system, Colin and your CEO presented this four-pillar that we also adopted at Palm Tran. One thing about, there's not a panacea for this, right? It's not a silver bullet. But it's important to have these systems in place to reduce the frequency of these events. An enterprise approach towards safety really mitigates the risks. And these are the systems that we use: policy, risk management, assurance, and promotion. So safety is everybody's responsibility. It's an enterprise approach that you have to take with ensuring that you have a safe system. So I'm not going to talk about these specifically, but policy, one thing that I think is important, and Mr. McLeod pointed it out, is that the major conflict on the bus with customers is fare collection. And one of the things I said was, when I come to an agency, I want to look at the fare policy and I want to make sure it's clear on how that bus operator engages the customer about fare. Because at the end of the day, I want my bus operators to go home to their family. That's the most important thing. And so we wrote this policy, and we put it in the type of vernacular that they clearly understand how to implement it. And we train them at the beginning, we retrain them. This is how you collect the fare. And they do it, they execute it very well at Palm Tran. And I'm just going to read this. It is the operator's responsibility to collect the correct fare. In the event a passenger does not deposit the correct fare, inform the passenger of the fare policy. And if they do not have the unpaid fare balance, allow them to ride. Do not further challenge the customer, but rather tell the customer to have a seat and count the passenger with the D button on the fare box. If a passenger refuses to pay the fare, explain the fare policy to the passenger. If they still refuse to pay the fare, notify somebody, the operations supervisor, and they will send assistance while you continue in service. Do not pursue an argument with the customer over a fare. The operations supervisor will instruct you on the necessary action to be taken. If a passenger boards the bus with no change, allow them to seek change from other passengers. Say, why would you do that? They do it anyway. So allow them to do it. Allow them to get the correct fare from other passengers if other passengers will help them with their fare. If they cannot obtain change, allow the passenger to ride. Again, explain the fare policy. Tell the customer to have a seat and count the passenger with the letter D button on the fare box. For repeated incidents of fare evasion by the same customer, submit a report with the description of the individual and location of boarding for follow-up. That's the fare policy. And that policy is explained over and over to the operator. It's not worth the $2. It's important to collect the fare. And we will assist you in collecting that fare if you have a knucklehead that you're dealing with. But get home to your family. So this is risk management. Again, I'm not going to go into this very comprehensively. You heard a lot of this from Mr. McLeod. On analyzing the risk, I think it's important. We measure things that are important. We have a program at Palm Tran that I'm very proud of. And when we talk about enterprise approach, it's called PT-STAT. It's Palm Tran Statistics. And we have a laser focus on key performance indicators in our organization, including safety, which is at the forefront. And we have cross-functional teams that meet during the month on all 9 metrics, including safety. And at the end of that month, we come together as a leadership team and we do a PT-STAT forum where cross-functional employees, it doesn't have to necessarily be within their discipline in the organization, and the leadership team are presented information on how we're doing with specific metrics and what tactics and what methods are we using to ensure that line is going in the right direction. And we make decisions right on the spot. We make funding decisions right on the spot, personnel decisions right on the spot. And sometimes we ask the employees to go back and think about it a little more and come back to the next forum. So this has really created a lot of great synergy with our organization, moving safety to another level. Then we follow up with Performance Tuesdays, where we have small quarterback meetings with our team and the team leaders, just to find out where these performance metrics are going. So at the BOLO boards, be on the lookout boards is another way we control the risk. We have a trespass ordinance. I believe you have one as well. And we have a close working relationship with police and the sheriff's office. Assurance, audits, data analysis, employee reporting is a part of those techniques that we use for assurance. Promotion, again, here are some techniques that we use for promotion. And you never can invest enough. One of the things that we invest in is training. We have a pretty robust de-escalation training program where every operator is trained on de-escalation. We do that when they enter the organization, but we do also put out a substantial investment for a third party to come in, because sometimes employees are used to your security people saying the same thing, me saying the same thing. We hire a third party, do role playing, and make it really interactive and fun. And so we do de-escalation training with all bus operators. They say, well, how do we schedule that? We'll schedule it. We schedule it, we pay them to be there, and we get done in about 6 weeks with all bus operators, and we have over 300. Advocating safety message, we'll talk a little about that. Toolbox talks, again, we just inundate our organization with the message of safety, and this is how we promote it. Safety message. Every meeting has to start with a safety message. That is a mandate. And guess what? It's so ingrained in our organization, oftentimes I forget to start the meeting with a safety message, and the staff will stop me and say, we need to do the safety message first. And so it's ubiquitous throughout the organization. These posters are on our electronic screens as well as on our static boards. The safety message is developed by our safety team, Mr. Morales and Mr. McKinney, every month, and we put this information out at the forefront of our organization. Again, technology is also important. Every bus that's produced in the public arena of transit has covert emergency notification system, where that operator can notify the authorities or the communication dispatch, and a sign typically will come up on the destination sign saying call police. So that's an important feature on all of our buses. Most buses all have cameras. Recurring security announcements. One of the things a technique that we've used that's been very, I think, really has contributed to the reduction of interactions, negative interactions with our customers, recurring security announcements where every 30 minutes, we say that we remind the customers that, hey, you're being video and audio recorded. And so the security announcement goes something like, good afternoon, customers. Thank you for riding Palm Tran. We have X amount of cameras on the bus for your and the bus operator's protection. Thank you for riding. And just okay, if I'm going to cut up, I just want to, they know, I'm just reminded of that, the little subliminal message. One technique that I'm sure you're pursuing, that we also are pursuing, are security awareness cameras, where you see your picture in the bus as the bus provides service. And this has been a proven technique that worked, and so we are procuring these cameras, these monitors as well. So, bus barrier. So I've worked at a lot of organizations, and in Miami-Dade Transit, we had the barrier. The operators never used them. They tied them back. I am a huge customer service leader. Customer service, and safety, but customer service. And I just felt that barriers diminish that customer experience from one human to the next. And so I've always been on the fence. I've always appreciated what the barriers brought, but I was always on the fence, and not on the fence alone, because I've taken surveys at almost every organization that I've led, including PalmTran recently, and guess what the vote was? The vote was 50-50. And I was like, well, I'm still unsure of whether I want to make that type of investment when half of our operators are saying that they don't want barriers. Time is done. With all of the de-escalation training and all the investment, I always say the operator's the first line of defense, because it's how you talk to that person. It's not the sheriff's office and the police. It's going to take your supervisor 7 to 10 minutes to get there. What has happened between that operator and customer before that time? It's what the operator in that operator's engagement. So I've always been big about that. Let's de-escalate train. Give them the tools to be able to deal with difficult situations, because they're the one dealing with the customer at the time. I wasn't completely right. Time is done. And so this issue has put me across that fence. And I am ordering barriers on all of our buses. This issue with this knucklehead who hit this operator has put me over the fence. I'm ordering barriers on all of our vehicles. And so we've installed 2 designs. I am claustrophobic. That's another reason I said I didn't want barriers, because a lot of operators are claustrophobic. And this is one, I think it's a vapor design. The gentleman in the tie, who's our director of operations, it's fully enclosed for the most part. It does have an electric window that you can roll down, and it has ventilation in the door. So they can either select that one or the Gillick design, which is a barrier that's diagonal that you can actually roll back. And that's another design. I am throwing out all of the traditional procurement practices where we go for an RFP. I'm going to do an emergency purchase on this because I want them installed post-haste. And it's going to cost my budget $1.1 million, and it's going to be, every penny is going to be worth it. And so the union is, of course, it's ATU, and they're on top of this issue as well. We've been working closely together, but this issue has put me across the fence, and we are installing bus barriers on all of our fixed route vehicles. And just to end, I just want to thank you again for your leadership. We are following your lead here. The Florida Public Transit Association, of which I am the treasurer and executive board member, and the HART Safety Symposium on July 29th, we are looking forward to that conversation. Again, thank you for allowing us to share some of the things that we're doing in Palm Beach County. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Forbes. Any questions, Mr. Forbes? Commissioner Shanahan, you recognize.
Thank you very much. It was an excellent presentation. Did you feel like when you met with the Secretary of Transportation or the affiliated representatives from the state that there was a supportive nature at the statewide level to be supportive of some of these actions around barriers or increased safety?
Normally when I meet for them, I'm just asking for money. The conversation of barriers, I met with our district secretary. We didn't have that conversation the last time I spoke with them. But they are supportive of increased safety. I tell you, Ben and I attended the APTA CEO Summit not too long ago, and we took sort of the same vote. and it was 50-50 among the transit leaders across the country that I don't know whether we'll implement the barriers. And so, I think that's, we're going to find a lot of our operators are still not going to want them. But this is a directive at this point.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Kemp, you recognized.
Thank you. The operator assault, I think it's like slide number 5 that you have. It's the BOLO, be on the lookout. There, that looks, do we have a similar thing here at HART like that? And I was just wondering when exactly, because this guy is at large, I guess.
No, he's in jail.
No, he's in jail.
He's in jail now, but he was
was
at large when you
yes,
did this.
yes.
So do you do this for every single time? Like I assume sometimes people get arrested or caught before they go at large. And then I also wondered about us, do we have this and are we doing this?
Yes, we do it every single time there's a physical touch. We do it immediately. Our director of security, our safety leader, our operations manager, one of them have to be on the scene when I get a call about this. And we immediately go back to the office, no matter what time it is, and put up a BOLO. We work closely with the sheriff's office. We pull the video. We watch it that night. We don't wait for the next day. And so, we just really, we put this at the highest priority when things like this happen. And it's a very effective tool. We post them. We ensure that it's ubiquitous throughout the organization. We post them in all of our facilities. I don't particularly like it because they're ugly faces of people who do ugly things. But we do that at the operators get the information and they communicate with us quickly about whether they saw that. But this is how actually that happened. An operator saw this person at a homeless facility and notified us, and we notified the police, and he was arrested.
Any other questions?
And just being on behalf of HART, Commissioner, yes, we follow the same program. We have an immediate BOLO alert that goes out, use a number of tools such as Everbridge, as well as our dispatch and our control center supervisors are trained. So we have immediate response and immediate notification anytime we have that type of event that takes place.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you both so very much
Thank
for being
you.
here. Anything you want to say, Mr. Lemon?
No, just excellent overview. Thank you both for taking time out of your busy schedules and, providing us your national perspective as well as the Palm Beach County view. Very much appreciated.
Okay, fiscal year 2020 preliminary budget overview. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. For the record, Cindy Stiglich, interim CFO for HART. Today I'd like to present a very brief overview of our FY20 budget development. At the Finance and Audit Committee back in June, I presented which was a very tax-centric presentation. However, based on the pending litigation, we thought it was more prudent to shift away from the sales tax and talk more about our current efforts in bringing you a functional, efficient, and balanced budget for consideration. Today we'll talk about the efforts getting to that point. So in this presentation today, I'd like to talk to you about the vision for our new budget process in FY20 as we go through that year. I'll highlight some of the operating revenues and expenses that we are considering in this budget development process. I'll cover our capital project plans, both those that are funded and those that are being developed as we look forward to the sales tax allocations, and then I'll close with next steps. So historically, HART has used the traditional budget-based planning approach in developing its annual budget, and essentially that's using last year's budget and actuals as the basis for planning next year's activities. However, under our new leadership, we'll be looking to shift to an outcome-based budgeting methodology, and basically we're beginning with the end in mind, letting our mission, goals, and objectives drive why and how funds are spent. Very simply stated, what do we want to achieve? How will we achieve those outcomes? How will we budget and finance the work plan? and then how do we measure and manage our performance. So you saw this slide in Mr. Limmer's brief update, and essentially to begin the journey in our coming fiscal year, we want to focus on success outcomes in four key areas: enhancing the customer experience and increasing satisfaction, sustaining a strong financial performance, engaging and developing our employees, and delivering value to the community. And as we begin to develop and implement that performance-based budget, our intention is to move the needle in all four of these areas. So now I'd like to highlight some of the revenue considerations we have for our current FY20 plan without sales tax. Ad valorem continues to be the largest funding source at about 55% of our budget. Later, I'll talk to you in the millage item. Essentially, we're expecting another $4 million in ad valorem revenues this year. We're projecting both customer fares and our federal funding to be flat to our FY19 budget, both actuals and budget. We're continuing to work with our partners at the county and FDOT for additional financial support of our current route operations. And for the second year, we're fortunate to be offering, again, free fares on our streetcar with the continuance of an $890,000 grant from FDOT. And as always, we do strive and have a goal to contribute to our cash reserves at the end of every fiscal year. So relating back to the focus in performance-based budgeting approach, we look to invest in the customer experience, in our employees, in our core business, all while focusing on our financial stewardship. So investing in the customer experience. In FY20, we're planning to maintain our current service levels with our existing funding. However, in anticipation of the sales tax, we are planning for service enhancements on some of our most widely used routes to include additional service and frequency. We're considering new service types, like an on-demand circulator in the uptown, downtown, and West Shore areas. And we'll be partnering with other agencies in an upcoming FTA Integrated Mobility Innovation Grant application for funding that will expand and enhance the customer's experience through technology and alternate transit options. Also, in terms of technology, FY20, I'm proud to say, finally marks the implementation of our Flamingo Regional Smart Card program. It is in the current testing phase. We will bring a project update to you prior to go live. Again, that project will go live probably in the first quarter of FY20. We'll come back to you in September with an update. Lastly, during Mr. Limmer's 100 days, and he mentioned it, a task team, technology task team was created and is being empowered over the next year to develop ideas and strategies to introduce technology in every phase of service that we provide to our customers. So an investment in our employee experience, as a service agency, our human capital is our largest percentage of our budget. We're initiating a compensation study to evaluate our current state of compensation, programs and practices, so that we're prepared for our growth that we expect in FY20 and to be competitive. Another goal of Mr. Limmer in his first 100 days was to create a workforce development task team. Again, in the upcoming year, they're going to be developing ideas and strategies to recruit, retain, and develop highly proficient operations and maintenance personnel that'll be necessary to support our service expansion and our culture of excellence. And finally, investment in the core business. Every year, we come to you and we're facing with increases in cost of doing business. Just to name a few, we have an aging fleet, so bus parts and supplies will continue to increase. We're investing in more security guard services to increase the protection of our patrons and our employees at transit centers. And our general liability and healthcare claims are projected to increase based on current trends. So now I'd like to shift to our FY20 capital plan. These are projects that we have currently identified, both federal and state and some local dollars for. The projects are listed in the order of financial magnitude, not necessarily those in order of priority. Again, most notably, I'd like to point out that we've allocated as well $1.1 million to the bus driver safety shields, and as noted before, they will be completed during the first quarter of FY20. Also for your consideration on the agenda later today is the Marion Transit Center infrastructure improvements, and then there's also a bus replacement item for those that have reached their useful life. At the time, we have only identified federal funding to support the purchase of 6 of those vehicles. I'd also like to point out that the stormwater mitigation for $1 million, as well as the transit-oriented development pilot study, both of which were FTA discretionary grants that we took the initiative and applied for this year and were awarded. So I'm pleased to announce that. The Tampa Bay Arterial Corridor Study, BRT study, and the autonomous vehicle pilot are being funded by FDOT. So back in October, we brought to the board our transit asset management plan. Of note was the fact that we were going into FY19 with a $43 million backlog in replacing items that had met their useful life. At the top of the list in dollar value and priority for most would be the replacement of our aged fleet, our diesel buses with CNG buses. Of note also is that our heavy maintenance building construction that we've been planning is sorely underfunded. Our fare boxes are 25 years old, and we're having difficulty even repairing those with parts that can no longer be obtained. And our bus and shelter program has been underfunded for many, many years. These projects will be prioritized and be brought back to you for consideration in September for consideration of any sales tax allocations. So between now and the next few weeks, we'll be refining our budget in order to present to the Finance and Audit Committee in August a balanced budget for your consideration in September. Oops. There we go. First public hearing is on September 9th. That'll be followed by a second and final public hearing on September 23rd for the adoption of our annual budget. So if there's any questions, I'll be happy to entertain.
Any questions? Any questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We now move to consent agenda. There are a number of items on consent agenda.
Move approval.
Question on the motion by Commissioner. Second to approve the consent agenda. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor, let me know by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed likewise. Motion's adopted. We're now moving to the regular agenda items. Resolution R 219-0729. Who's presenting that? Cindy? Scott.
That was part of the consent.
Yeah.
That's part of consent?
Yeah, you go
I'm
to
sorry,
10.
I'm sorry, right. Regular approval of action items, resolution 2019-0730.
Move approval.
Well, there's a presentation on it, I believe.
This is the authorized, Mr. Chair, members of the board, good afternoon. Scott Draver, Chief of Maintenance and Facilities. Asking the board to authorize the CEO to approve the purchase of up to 96 CNG buses. These purchases would be relying on the tax surcharge, and if we were to issue a PO today, it would be strictly on the money that Cindy had allocated for the FY 2020, which would be the $3.4 million.
Question?
I have a question?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Mechanic, Director.
How is the agreement structured so that you would, understanding that not that I have any fear about the litigation, but in the unlikely event that we do not prevail, how is the agreement structured so that we will only buy the number of buses that we can afford?
John Edmondson, Director of Procurement. The first consideration is that this agreement is purchasing off of a state-based contract, so it's a state purchasing schedule. We're not obligated to a minimum amount nor a maximum amount, nor constrained to a maximum amount. We will issue a purchase order based on the number of units that we have available funding for at the time the purchase order is issued, and make our letter of intent known that any additional units above and beyond that currently available funded quantity is contingent upon a funding model coming from the surtax allocation. That'll allow us the flexibility to either stick with the minimum amount or go all the way up to a full.
Okay, great, thank you.
Commissioner Kemp, you recognize, oh, I'm sorry,
Thank-
Commissioner Kemp, Mr. Harden, you recognize.
Thank you. I moved to bring this forward to the full board, but had some concerns about it with regards to such a large investment in, CNG buses. So I think that the gentleman who spoke earlier had some good comments about kind of the carbon footprint of this gas that's extracted in this way. And, I think when we look at, the purchase of 96 buses and how that relates, I think a net present value calculation of the difference between diesel hybrids or electric buses as compared to this investment would be information that I would like to have as a board member to be able to support this. Additionally, seeing a schedule of the actual timeline of need for these 96 buses as compared to the buses that they're going to replace would be information that I would want to be able to vote to support this. And then additionally, since we're saying this purchase is contingent on the tax, which again, I don't have a concern ultimately about that, but the issue of the timing of this against how we see the bus, facility, which would need to be in place to charge hybrid buses, and the modifications that need to be made there. So, I guess as somebody who's, supposed to be here looking out for the public money, and I also think looking out for the vision that the folks who overwhelmingly passed the transit initiative had, that, if we were saying, well, we need, a third of these 96 buses to get us through a period to get proper, more modern facilities in place to use better technology moving forward, then I would understand it. Or maybe you have data that can support the need for 96 buses to get us there. But I would, personally wouldn't be supporting this today and would need that additional information to be able to support it. Thanks.
Commissioner Kemp, you recognize.
Thank you. As I think almost everybody knows, I've been endlessly promoting electric buses. In the sales tax provision that we saw before the budget, we have 10 there upon receipt. They're paid for at the time. They're actually reserved now. The buses take about, as I understand, and I'll just clarify, about a 2-year order window. I know it was special that we were kind of looking at the electric buses for 18 months, and we pay upon receipt. And I know that a lot of these, on the typical years, they're 80% paid by the feds with grants and 20% paid by the state, depending like in a formula with your agencies. So as I understand this, we wanted to replace what are very old diesel buses at this point. We couldn't replace it with an electric fleet, although I really appreciate the questions that they wouldn't even be available soon enough under this. And they have about a 7-year lifespan, I think, if that's correct.
40-foot bus would have a 12-year lifespan or 500,000.
The thing that I was and I've been back and forth with Mr. Limmer about this and everything, is to kind of, I think the first thing we do need to do is really expand our service, our bus service from the start. And it would require us to get far more buses than we have to do that, to do more comprehensive service and service in places where we have caught over and over again. And I think that this would be the way to most immediately bring that about and be able to get the buses and be able to implement the service in a way if we were to order them now. I just wanted to clarify that that was my understanding of it, because I've been back and forth with this, and I am, from everything I've heard, supporting this going forward because of that. And I think we will need, our facilities now can't hold any more buses, and so I guess that's also happening simultaneously, but cannot happen until we get a larger facility. So anyway, I just am kind of clarifying my understanding of how this moves forward. It's a complicated way, but right now, I guess about half of our fleet is diesel and about half CNG, and I think the oldest part is diesel, and we could replace those. And then when we get our electric buses, also make sure that everything, although they've been operating just great, Proterra buses in other jurisdictions, even with heat, and we could just kind of see for ourselves and get the evidence of that. But it would typically take a 2-year window, and they can't just gear up to the numbers that, in fact, they say if we cannot put the dollar down on those Proterra buses, they will be gone instantly because other people, would like to get them as soon. I don't know if I've done that justice, but.
Commissioner Smith, you recognize.
Yes, I also, of course, wish that we could replace all our buses with electric buses as quickly as possible. But I am comforted by the knowledge that we are going to get this influx of cash from the transit tax, and we will be purchasing 18, 20 or more buses a year from that tax, and can be adding to our fleet electric buses as we move forward. So and that's my understanding there. So and that will allow us to ramp up the infrastructure needed for the electric buses as we go. So that's my thinking in terms of approving CNG for now.
Ms. Shanahan, you recognize.
Well, I would just like to have clarity on what Commissioner Kemp said, because I do think there's a sense of the board, and there has been previously, that we have a sustainable environmental goal in terms of getting to electric when the technology can support it. And I don't know if that's stated anywhere in the policy, but I was going to support this because it said up to 96, and we don't have the funding, and it's going to be an evolution, and we need to transition some of the older buses to something that actually can work more efficiently. But I just have to share, I was at a race yesterday, e-formula race, and the batteries last year, they had to switch cars midway through a 25-minute race. This year, they didn't have to switch cars. So the evolution of batteries is going so fast that I think that it could be sooner rather than later that we're actually looking at more probability of higher and better value on the electric side. But it's from a perspective of where we are today, this transition, we need to, I think, be supportive of this.
Mr. Melendez, recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In the respect to supporting our program, I'm in support of this. And just a couple points. I think looking at this from two perspectives. One would be kind of carbon footprint, which Mr. Harden brought up. I think if we look at that, Mr. Harden, I think you requested maybe some additional information from staff. Is that
correct?
I think with that information, perhaps if it's available, I think it would be important to look at, say, a comparison between the carbon footprint of a certain, a set number of vehicles that run off natural gas and those that are electric, because it's important to keep in mind that electricity is still generated by coal and natural gas-fired power plants. Two of them are in our area. So, and what's interesting is when you talk transmission, there is zero loss in energy, at least in the product, when you're talking about natural gas being transmitted, to our location. Whereas when electricity is generated at a power plant, there's loss. So it would be interesting just to get from a background, as long as you're going to be getting information on how that stacks up. One of the learning lessons we hit when we converted to natural gas, right, coming from full diesel to natural gas, some of the savings we thought we were going to get by switching to compressed natural gas was the gas had to be compressed. and that compressing of that gas required electric pumps. So we lost some savings there. So the more data, the better, but, to the extent it's practical. Number two, I think the second way of looking at this, I think, is also from the stewardship standpoint, again, Mr. Harden, which I appreciate. I definitely would want to know, again, carbon footprint aside, what is the comparative efficiency of the use of the public dollar? So, thank you.
Commissioner Overman, you recognize.
Thank you, Chair. So basically, we would be purchasing 96 buses for approximately $540,000 apiece, as opposed to an electric bus that would cost us about $1 million.
Well, about 750.
750. Because we've budgeted $10 million for Terra buses for 10 buses. I'm just trying to.
I believe it's like 13.
The bus themselves are about 750 to 800,000, but with the ancillary equipment to go along with that, as well as the infrastructure that's required to provide the electricity and the charging capacity, for 10 buses, we're looking at about $13 million in electric.
Okay, so is that $300-something thousand in difference of a one-time cost or an ongoing expense associated with the electric buses?
No, that'd be a one-time cost.
A one-time cost, okay. Because I'd be curious to see what the maintenance cost comparison, upfront cost comparison, and then life expectancy of each of the vehicles. Because currently we have diesel vehicles, and what's the life expectancy typically?
All 40-foot buses, no matter how they're proposed, is 12 years or 500,000 miles.
For any different type?
Yes, doesn't matter who the manufacturer and if it's a 40-foot bus.
I'm sorry?
If it's a 40-foot bus, it doesn't matter who the manufacturer is.
Okay, so it's estimated that the life expectancy for each kind is approximately 12 years? 12 years.
So keep in mind, HART's fleet is averaging 500,000 miles in 10 years.
Okay, all right. So but with this purchase, we're really just adding 16 additional buses to add to routes because we're replacing 80, basically 80 existing diesels that are beyond their life expectancy. What's the operating cost and maintenance cost of the CNGs as compared to the diesels?
I can get you those figures. I do have those figures.
Okay, what is it, can you give me a range? Significantly more, less?
No, it's not significant.
It's not significantly more for the CNGs as it is for the diesel?
No, ma'am.
Okay. All right. And where do we purchase our CNG gas? Who do we purchase that
We're on
from?
site from TECO.
From TECO? Okay. Okay. I too am a little concerned about investing in technology that may not necessarily be environmentally friendly for the long term, given that it's a 12-year investment. That's why I asked the questions, what are we expecting for that to last? But I also recognize that we need to buses quickly. And if there is a lead time on obtaining different technology that would make it more difficult to achieve that, even if we had the capital, I think that's something worth considering. Thank you very much for your information.
Commissioner Kemp, you recognize.
I'm wondering, with this being part of the Jacksonville contract, can we, because there seems to be these questions, it'd be good for people to understand what the difference costs are in long-term operations and those other things. I believe it would take us longer to get the electric buses, that we couldn't get any more than this on the order that we could get the CNGs. But I'd like to know if I made a motion to continue, will it impede this, since we're going along with this Jacksonville contract, to just make a motion to continue and have a more thorough presentation next month with all the questions that people are asking? And two, what about the flexibility in this, because it does say up to the 96, in terms of staggering this out as we go on and just having the ability to do that, but not necessarily to act on that. Those are my two questions in terms of moving forward.
If I could address the question of timeline. First of all, with the Jacksonville contract, we have not yet issued a purchase order. So what we're asking for today is just the authority to spend or to issue a purchase order for up to 96 units. With that authority, obviously comes some additional conversation and analysis internally to determine exactly how many units we want to be on that purchase order. The production time, once we issue the purchase order, is anywhere between 12 and 16 months. So if we issued that purchase order today, those new units would probably start rolling in sometime around this time next year. The electric bus turnaround time, they're building those buses irrespective of whether we purchase them or somebody else purchases them. So the lead time on the electric buses is a little bit shorter in that regard. Also understand that by issuing the authority for us to issue a purchase order for up to 96 buses today, we still may never issue a purchase order. We still may not issue a purchase order if the surtax revenue doesn't come in at what we expect it to come in or doesn't come in at all. So that we're not necessarily locking into anything with Gillig as a partner today.
So will you return to us with each specific purchase? Like if you just go to purchase 20, will they come before us again to authorize that, or this just get, you know?
This would be just the authority to hit that mark at 96 when we issue purchase orders as funding is available.
Okay, and if I made a motion to continue and it was seconded, is this going to impede this hugely by waiting till next month?
Won't impede it in any way.
Okay, then I'll make a motion to continue this.
Second.
There's a motion by Commissioner Kemp, second by, I think, Commissioner Mechanic and Mr. Harden, to continue this particular item, Resolution 2019-07-30. Any discussion? Seeing no discussion, Mr. Melendez, you recognize.
Yeah, I would just like to clarify, I think it would be beneficial, again, Mr. Harden requested information, I mentioned some information. I think that a comprehensive look at both, carbon footprint and cost to the taxpayer would be good, all the way back to the point source. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Melendez, Mr. Harden, you recognize that?
Yes, and again, obviously, we need to order some diesel buses. So, a timeline showing us, against the, the useful life timeline or replacement timeline. In other words, we need to order 36 buses next month, and then, another 36 in 2 months or 3 months, and, how that fits so that we can, I think, make a decision. Thanks.
Mr. Mechanic, you recognize.
Well, in light of what we just heard,
Pull your mic down.
in light of what we just heard regarding the fact that electric buses might be here as soon or sooner than the CNG, I was, as part of next month's presentation, if you could talk about the pros and cons of doing some sort of mixture of purchase where we pick up some number of electric buses and CNG buses to start phasing in the electric bus that we think we'll ultimately be moving to anyway. I mean, 12 years is a long time, so we're committing to a long time of not having a full conversion, so maybe there's a happy medium there somewhere.
Mr. Melendez, recognized.
Very quick comment. I just wanted to bring up just a detail here that I know staff will have to deal with this given our questions. During my briefing, and again, Mr. Limmer, thank you for a great briefing. I asked about, the different, just different Gillig buses. And it was interesting to learn that, just if we even just switch brands, that then has a domino effect on our maintenance and our training and our parts. So I just want everyone to keep in mind that as we consider other technologies, that does have a domino effect. I'm not saying it's big or small, I'm just saying that there are other considerations there that we're not even hitting yet today. Thank you.
Commissioner Overman, you recognize.
I think it was very valuable to hear that.
Remember, folks, we have a motion to continue, so continue to ask your question.
But I think it was very valuable to get the information on the timeline, because that clearly is important to recognize, especially if we are considering making the conversion. So I would like to get a better understanding of why that's a year away, or, in the next, when you come back with more information, help us understand why it would take a year to get, that particular process in place. Okay.
Pardon me?
The Gillig vehicles?
Come on to the microphone, sir.
Sorry. The Gillig vehicles, their production schedule does not allow us to be inserted into their assembly line when a purchase order is issued. So once we meet with them, finalize design, and they understand exactly what the specification needs to be, they'll put us in the first immediate available slot.
Which addresses my concern about continuance. If we keep continuing this and not, it just pushes it out another month, another month, another month.
Yes, it does, but there typically is not, by delaying the decision to issue a purchase order by a month, it wouldn't necessarily have an exponential effect on when we could get into the production schedule for Gillette.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Let me ask a question. It appears that there is a lot of information you want brought back on this issue, all right? Mr. Harden, you wanted some information brought back. Commissioner Overman, you wanted some information brought back. I think Mr. Melendez wanted information brought back. Someone make an amendment to the motion to have all this information brought back when we continue this next week, next month?
I will make that motion to continue with the information questions that the various board members, I have just considered that would be part of it. Sorry, but to be clear, that all the information that people ask for in terms of the cost analysis, the ability to do it, our needs, the operations center, the different maintenance protocols, and also, as I understand, electric is a lot more maintenance-free than the other buses. But if we could have all that brought back and presented, I know we had an electric bus presentation done here, like right after, I think in the first 9 months I was here. So it's been a while, and it'd be good for everyone to get that information in a more comprehensive way, so we start to kind of move together on this.
Who seconded the motion?
I did.
You okay with that?
Yes,
Okay, all right.
I second that motion.
Okay. Any other question on the motion? All those in favor, let me know by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, likewise. Motion adopted. Thank you. Resolution 2019-07-31. Mr. Smith.
Yes, basically, the item is on page 10.9 of your backup material. This is a motion to revise the policy regarding the election of officers. You may recall this was a motion made by Commissioner Kemp. Essentially, what it does is it only requires that one of the officers be elected by a county via an elected county official. Previously, you had one elected county, one elected municipality, one who was none of those. Now, the only requirement is that at least one is an elected county rep. The others are open.
Motion approved.
Motion
Second.
by Mr. Melendez, second by, who seconded? Mr. Councilman, Assembly to approve item 2019-07-131. Any other discussion? Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, let them know by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, likewise.
I'm opposed.
One opposition. Motion adopted. Okay. Resolution R 2019-07-32.
Pursuant, Cindy Stiglich, interim CFO for HART. Pursuant to Florida Statute 200-65, HART has 35 days from the receipt of the certified property value to advise the property appraiser of its proposed not to exceed millage rate, its rollback rate, and the date, time, and place that it will conduct a public hearing to consider the proposed millage rate and tentative budget. The certified property values were received on June 25th, and based on those valuations of over $1.1 billion, it's estimated that $50,828,236 worth of revenue will be generated. We budget that at 95%, so $48,315,324 will be budgeted in our FY20 operating budget. This represents a 9.15% increase in taxable value, in taxable values, and a $4,050,378 increase over the FY19 budget. So with your approval today, I will certify to the property appraiser the proposed not to exceed millage rate for FY20 is 0.5. The proposed not to exceed millage rate of 0.5 is 6.66% above the rollback rate of 0.4688. And our first public hearing to tentatively approve the millage and budget is on September 9th at 5:30 here in these offices. And I'd ask your approval.
So moved.
There's a motion by Commissioner Kemp, second by Councilman Schussler to approve item R 2019-07-32. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, likewise. Motion is adopted. Thank you, ma'am. Resolution 2019-07-33.
before you today is a resolution to authorize the CEO to execute a memorandum of understanding between HART and the Tampa Downtown Partnership to assist with the operating of the Tampa Downtown On-Demand Transportation Service through December 31st of this year in the amount not to exceed $455,000. We are preparing a solicitation for the Tri-Area Circulator Service, which will include, as I mentioned before, the assumption of the downtown provision as well as the USF Innovation District and West Shore areas. This is a stopgap measure to ensure that HART will allow the provision of services up until the time at which we have our own solicitation finalized. The funding impact for this project will be $380,000 to HART's general funds. That is a 50% match to an FDOT grant of $380,000, which will more than sufficiently cover this memorandum of understanding.
Any questions? Commissioner Kipper recognized.
Thank you. I have several questions. In fact, I would have actually pulled the original item from the consent, but I was able to feel a comfort level with that. But in terms of this, so we have not contributed any money before. The contribution made by us was actually the Downtown Partnership and FDOT money to pay for this in the past, correct?
Yes, we have not financially contributed to the provision of service. However, we did lend the leases or the Teslas to the provision of service.
Is that what we're doing now? Is that Tesla lease contract still in effect?
It is.
And so is that the cost there that we're?
No, this is irrespective of the Tesla leases.
So we're paying for the Tesla leases and this?
We're paying for the Tesla leases and 50% of the monthly charge, getting us through to December 31st.
Okay.
So they're estimating about $90,000 a month in service, which would be about a $45,000 provision for HART's general funds.
Yeah, I just want to, for one thing, there's nothing we can do about the Teslas, right? We can't. That is a contract that we can't, because I think they're really impractical for use in this nature, the way the doors go out with our rain, and the very back seat is terrible. But I guess if we have that contract, we got it from this being done some time ago for HART back at the university area. But if we can't change that, that's one thing. The second thing is I just have issues with the fact that we would be paying for, with our transit money, while we have so many really incredible needs that we have cut during Mission Max, like the Fletcher and Fowler Avenue, that served a lot of people and are very important. And we cut those, but we're giving to this. I just have issues in terms of that. But I'd like to make clear, too, that this kinds of door-to-door transit services are not economical. They're not effective. They're a poor way to do transit from all reports. I've seen a whole discussion of this by transit agencies across the country, none of which could cite it as being very beneficial. In the past, when we did this first and last mile, FDOT was paying the $16, and we paid 3 of it, or 1 of it, or the customers did, and that's what we paid. So for every ride under 3 miles, FDOT was willing to do $13. Now it's us doing probably something like that, I don't know, but along with FDOT doing half of it. But I just want to make it clear, I think the best way that we can most efficiently handle this in the way that they do in Orlando and other transit agencies across the country is we should have buses running around downtown on a fixed route that picks people up every 10 minutes or something, and not have 4 or 6 vehicles, whatever it is, that people have to wait hours to get on, that get on for free and that are all over the place in no coordinated way. But moving forward, I guess are we obligated to do this through the end of this year?
It would depend on your vote today.
Okay, so otherwise we don't have to take up this obligation? Okay. Then I will not be supporting this through the end of the year. I'd really like to see this be done now in with us doing something in terms of bus service and seeing if FDOT will contribute to that and have a fixed route that really is serving people in this route at this time.
Mr. Hart, you recognize.
So is it still factual that the two biggest users of this existing circulator service are UT students from Channel Side to the campus and Marriott Waterside employees from the Marion Street Transit Center to the hotel and back?
Justin Willis with Service Development, the director is not. We have always at Comto. The last data I've seen, that was the case. They've revised the service delivery a little bit for the UT students to where they have more of a hub, so it's kind of helped control that a little bit, but I would say that that's still a fair assessment from the data I've seen.
So, Director Limmer, what is the net effective if we don't approve this today? The expense of this, which is, it says 455, but is it 380,000? Not to exceed 455, but I believe she said our contribution was.
Do you want to come to the
Yeah,
financials?
I can comment on that. In fact, in the consent agenda, you voted on accepting the funding from FDOT. If that funding is not used for this initiative, that could carry over into our own initiative based on whatever model we come up with. So FDOT is allowing us to use their funding to continue the support of this downtown provision, but if we decide not today to continue that, we can ask them to apply that to our own initiative.
So that could go to fund this university-style downtown circulator that
Correct.
could actually maybe take cars off the road in downtown Tampa.
That's right.
Because I think the conclusion you might draw is that the folks using the circulator now weren't going to drive anyway, so that we didn't take any cars out of downtown. Thank you.
Mr. Overman, you recognize.
Yeah, I've always, while I do appreciate that this is a great service, I do find that it's free, correct?
It is.
Yeah, well, door-to-door service, unless you're disabled or have an inability financially to own a car, is a luxury and not a need, as far as I'm concerned. We have a bus route that was canceled that's on 78th and Broadway in the Sable Park area that we're now putting 455 families that are moving out of homelessness for all practical purposes, or some number like that, that we've canceled their line. So if we could reallocate that to the people who actually could use some free service and to assist those people for full employment, that would be of great value. And I would like to suggest that while I do like the idea of helping people recognize the value of transit, this isn't, in my opinion, a way of doing that. If we created a circulator that actually moved more people in the university area, which clearly is needed, I would love to have a trolley in other parts of our communities where there's density and people wanting to move within a certain area that doesn't really work very well with a larger transit system. That makes sense too. But I'm not certain we're meeting the mission by investing in something that the individuals that are in the downtown area are clearly working and able to afford. Uber, and they're using this as an alternative for free. I would too, but it doesn't seem to be within our mission as far as a priority is concerned. So,
Mr. Kemp, you recognize.
I'd like to make a motion that we, that we get a proposal that in terms of using, because this is just this, even though it mentions the other things, it is just to serve downtown through the end of this year. So I'd like to make a motion that staff come back with a proposal for a bus route circulator in downtown, a fixed route that has stops on it, and come up and let's see if FDOT will support that to replace the downtowner system.
I think we had that.
Well, motion by Commissioner Kemp, second by Mr. Hartman. Is there any discussion? Mr. Mechanic, you have
A question. I don't necessarily disagree with the sentiments that have been expressed, but I think we previously voted to take over the system. Are we, with this vote, are we leaving them in a situation where they have to cease service in a short period? I mean, they have commitments and so forth, and I don't want to create chaos here in the process of perhaps making a better decision. I'm just trying to understand what the implication.
Sure, I'll have Cindy cover the terms of the current contract between the downtown partnership and the operator.
It is my understanding that the downtown partnership does not have additional funding to support this contract beyond August.
Beyond August.
Beyond August. So we were picking that service up for September. Actually, we would be picking it up for August, and then they would be billing us in September. So I don't know if they would be able to sustain that service beyond August, but it was my understanding that they did not have the funding.
Mr. Melendez recognized.
Yeah, I'd just like to simply second Mr. Mechanic's comments. It's keeping our partners in mind.
Ms. Williams recognized.
If it were not for the fact that that they were running out of dollars, would we have this conversation? Was this part of the plan?
I'm sorry, say that again?
If it were not for the fact that the downtowner was out of money by August, is what you said? I think that's what the date you gave.
Yes.
Would we not have this conversation, or was this already part of the plan?
I believe that we had originally thought that we would be looking at our own solution prior to now, but that would have been predicated on sales tax and how we would be able to support that beyond the funding that FDOT was going to add to the equation. So I believe that without this support, that contract would have ended with Downtown Partnership.
And if I can just clarify, if I may, the downtown partnership, the contract is up in August. Originally, they voted to extend the contract through the end of the year with the understanding that HART would receive money from FDOT to pay for that extension of service. Meanwhile, staff, Ms. Stiglitz mentioned that staff is actually working on a request for proposals. We did receive proposals several months ago, but they were not economically competitive. But it was only for the downtowner service, so this new request for a proposal would look at service options in our three largest centers in our county, which is West Shore, Uptown, and downtown Tampa. Now, those options that can be proposed, they can be fixed route services, they can be on-demand services, they can be flexible, they can be hybrids, depending upon the geography that is serving. But we were very interested in how the marketplace would react to those solutions. Might very well be that a circulator is proposed for downtown, just regular fixed route service is the most optimal solution for the West Shore area, for example. So there's a lot more to come with regards to the circulator service, but I just wanted to, provide a little context about the near term with the downtowner specifically, as well as how it fit into our overall strategy.
With that, Chairman, I just wanted to understand, instead of the recommendation to come back with a fixed route option, I would like to understand what our options are across the board.
I think we had a very serious conversation, and the expectation is that we expressed support of supporting this when we partnered with the downtown partnership. So I don't think it's fair to give somebody a 30-day notice and cut it off. I think it's reasonable to say we'll fund it through the end of the year and look at something in terms of 2020 that could be additive. But they do not have the money. I mean, I've been a member of the downtown partnership since it started, and I think to John's point, they are a partner. So, and it's this growing area in Tampa, and I'm going to be supportive of this.
Commissioner Kemper recognized.
And as far as I knew when we did this, I did not believe that we were expending funds to do it. And when we have all these other budget cuts, and it sounds like there was some confusion about that, but it's not as though we're not saying we wouldn't do service, because I'd be very supportive of doing fixed route service to serve these areas and whatever, and I think that that would be much more robust. And so I guess maybe we could have some comparison, because I'm fine if we're going to spend money on doing fixed route service that we do, but I do not think we should be highly subsidizing this as we're cutting off regular fixed route service in very needy areas that no longer have bus service and we're incredibly hurt by it.
Mr. Hart, you recognize.
So, yeah, it was my understanding at the time that we voted on this that there would be no cost to HART and that it was fully funded by FDOT, but that was my recollection of it. But I do have two questions with regards to the money from FDOT. So if we wanted to redeploy that money, what is the timeline within which we're allowed to do that?
If we execute the grant now, they like to see that money being spent within a year or becomes inactive. We also have additional funding in the next 2 subsequent years in the amount of $1.3 million in each of those 2 years for a downtown solution. So while they would agree most likely to hold on the funding if that's your pleasure, they will be looking for us to get the next allocation this time next year, and without movement on that first year, they would be more reluctant to execute that second year.
Mm-hmm.
You done?
Yeah, thank you.
Mr. Sisler, you're Councilman Sisler.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I would like to echo the comments of Ms. Shanahan. I think it's very difficult to give them a 30-day notice and say, oh, sorry, we're not going to do this anymore. The only other point that I'd like to make on this is approximately 1 month ago, every one of these issues was brought up in the Finance and Audit Committee. I think it's very unfair for us to do this to staff. These are comments that could very well have been brought up back then on every one of the issues that have been done, and it tends to be a whiplash effect on our staff. We can't just, oh, well, we don't do it. Yeah, we'll change our heart. We need to, and many of the objections are brought up by people who were in those meetings. So if we've given consent to the board and we agree with this, we have to remember that it's going to potentially mess up timetables and schedules and everything else on our staff and make it difficult for them to function. So, granted, they do these things on a regular basis, but it's still difficult to operate. But I do agree in this particular case, it's going to be difficult to the downtown partnership for them to recover. Maybe give them a year's notice and do what we have to do, but at this point it'd be unfair.
Mr. McKenna, you recognize.
Thank you. I'd like to make, if it's appropriate, a substitute motion that we continue this vote for 1 month to allow Mr. Limmer and his staff, the Downtown Partnership, and the DOT to meet to come up with a recommendation in light of the concerns expressed. Because I also have said that I don't see the downtowner as a sustainable system. There's got to be another way that it can be run.
I'll withdraw my second from the motion that's on the table, and I'll second this motion.
You beat me to it.
And I'll withdraw my motion.
So you withdraw your motion?
That makes it easier.
That makes it easier.
So then I just have a regular motion.
Yeah. Okay. So we have a motion by Mr. Mechanic. Is there a second? Second by
Yes, sir.
Is there any further discussion on the motion by Mr. Mechanic? Ms. Williams, recognize.
Mr. Limmer, is this contract through the end of the year, or did we commit 1 more year beyond August? Or Cindy?
Yeah, what we're agreeing to here is that we would support this through the end of the calendar year, December 31st.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Menendez recognizes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. By delaying this 1 month, will we be, impacting or creating any kind of a gap, or do we have room here?
Well, we would be then going into August, which
Yeah.
is the point
It's
at
like the
which
month that
their
it's supposed to.
contract is expiring. So a decision would need to be made to make sure that there was continuing operations no later than that August board, August 4th, I believe.
Yeah, I don't like surprising my friends, and so I think, I'm in support in general of this as long as it doesn't impact any operations.
Mr. Holman, you recognize.
Thank you. And to the point, yeah, I don't like surprising my friends either, but honestly, this is sort of the first time this board has actually considered extending this beyond August. It was, we're now being asked to come up with monies that we didn't anticipate spending. Now, granted, we have the FDOT match, which is awesome. But again, if we agreed to provide this service and we agreed to have it do it without additional cost initially, then we're not necessarily following that same expectation because we're asked to kick in, $380,000. So to be fair, I think it's important to recognize that if our partners knew early in the year that they were going to need money, it would be nice to know it in August. It would be nice to know it before July. So to your point, yes, we don't want to leave them hanging, but we're also being asked to do something at the last minute as well. So I appreciate that we'll be, if we bring it back in August, take a look at what the alternatives are to having us come up with additional resources. I recognize the match is required, but if there's a way that we could actually look at doing it differently so that it's more efficient and more sustainable, I'd be willing to consider that as an alternative. Thank you.
And just to be fair, the match does not have to come from HART's coffers necessarily, it just has to be a local match. So I'm sure if there are other options.
So we could find a sponsor?
If we could find a sponsor that
Wouldn't
could
that be
match
awesome?
FDOT's funding, that would be an option. I'm just throwing that out because it's important to know that this is a 50-50 grant, but it just has to be local funding.
Excellent, thank you.
See a hand? Okay. We have a motion on the floor by Mr. Mechanic, second by Mr. Harden. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
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 Opposed likewise. Motion is adopted. Okay, in your agenda packet, you have your HART Board Committee reports, your representative reports, your status reports, the public input we have right now. Dennis Butler.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon to the board and the audience. I appreciate this time to be able to talk. I have a couple issues I'd like to bring to your attention. One of them is I've had trouble with the drivers not being able to find me, to pick me up. And when I'm on the van, they ask me the location of where I am or where I want to be dropped off. And the reason for this, and I think maybe the IT department might be able to assist in fixing the problem, is when you call in, the people who answer the phones, their screen is bigger than the driver's little screen, so they can type more in than the drivers can see. And it's not good when the driver looks on that little screen and sees drop off and pick up at, and that's all it shows them. But when you call in, it shows more on their screen. And I'm thinking that both screens need to be consistent with each other. And when you call in, the screens that those employees use they should be able to input the same amount of information that the driver's little screen says. Can you understand that? Did I explain that okay?
I think we got it.
And the other thing is, I've noticed drivers are not paying attention to their manifest, or they don't care. I'm not sure which. But it clearly says in a little box, VIP, visually impaired person, that means. In the other place, it says that I have a service animal. Between the two, they should figure out that I might not always see when they pull up to pick me up. Now, they've put a comment in there that says needs assistance, blind needs assistance. So the drivers need to do a little better job at figuring this out, because one day the driver called in, and I was a no-show. And I was 3 feet from my door, and every few minutes I'd go look and see if she's out. And it's a good thing I did that time, because she had already called me in as a no-show and was ready to pull out. I had to yell for her to stop.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I don't know what you can do about that.
We've got it noted. Thank you
Thank
very much.
you.
Thank you. George Boysurge. No, I messed it up.
Good morning, everyone. I'm here about a safety concern that I have with the bus drivers not fastening wheelchairs in properly. And this has been going on since the 1990s. I've been down here, I've been down to the board before and complained about it. I've complained at 21st Street. I complained at your main office when it was across from City Hall. They are still doing the same thing they did back in the 90s. I had my mother in a wheelchair for 11 years. I had another lady in a wheelchair for 12 years, and they're still doing it. I got my wife in a wheelchair right now. And Friday, I had 3 bus drivers fail to fasten the wheelchair in properly. If you'd like to see how they do it, I can show you.
Okay.
Would anyone like to see how they do it?
We will reach out to you and have a conversation about the specific ways that they are.
But nobody does nothing about it. They say they're going to bring the drivers in, they retrain them. It never gets done. And it's going to happen again. They turned my mother over on a wheelchair because the wheelchair was not fastened in properly. When they put the wheelchair in, they're supposed to pull it back so they can fasten those back straps in tight, because they'll stay looser than the front ones. And then pull the wheelchair forward and put the ones on the front. And I have straps on my wheelchair, on the wheelchair, that they don't use the straps. They put them on the wheel, they put them on a screw, they put them everywhere but where they're supposed to be doing.
Sir,
Now, I'd like to roll her up here and show you how they've been doing.
Sir, we have our CEO is here, our safety director is behind you. They're going to get with you to make sure that they get those things in place, and we'll make sure that the drivers are
I
trained
talked
to
to
get that done.
Gregory a week ago, and he was supposed to get on it, and they're still doing it.
We're going to get on it, sir. We'll get on it.
Because if they don't, I'm gonna see if I can file ADA lawsuit against you.
Sir, we're going to get on it.
Because sooner or later, my wife's gonna get flipped over. The other day, the bus driver on the 400 made the turn at Fletcher, Nebraska so fast that he almost flipped her over. Because the straps happened to be tight at that time. But if they had been loose, he would have flipped her over because he was going too fast around the turn. And these drivers are late, and your bus stops are so far apart, you gotta walk 1.5 miles to get to a bus. And you got poor bus service compared to the 1950s. You had the same routes, shorter routes, and you had better bus service than you got now. You all changed the service and cut off these buses. And now you're putting the 39 back to the net park. And what it's caused is when you cut that bus off, it makes the number 6 get crowded. It used to be you could go in the net park, you could get off one bus, right on another bus.
Okay.
Now you go in there, you got
Okay,
no
sir,
buses in there.
Sir, your time is up. First and foremost, we're gonna get the
right.
taken care of, and we're gonna definitely do our very best to get the more buses on the routes.
Like
Okay?
talking to the wall.
Well, whatever. Anyone else want to discuss? We have any old business? Any new business? We're adjourned.
No, not a problem. Questions, and then I can join you. Where will you be? Will you be over here?
She can, remember, she had the number that.